They say legacy is everything in a family like mine. The Aragon name opened doors, bent rules, cleared paths. From the outside, we were untouchable, old money, corporate empire, generations of power wrapped in sharp suits and silk gowns. But behind the gates of the estate, legacy came with strings. And those strings were strangling me. Growing up, I learned early what silence earned you: protection. What obedience bought: approval. I was the daughter from the first marriage, the one they needed for appearances but never quite trusted. My stepmother made sure I never forgot I wasn't hers. My father, ever the strategist, saw me as an asset to be leveraged. My half-brother, Julian, thrived in that world. But I never did. I learned to nod, smile, blend. But I never stopped thinking. Never stopped watching. By the time I was 22, I'd mastered the role they cast me in. I attended every event. Wore the dresses they picked. Smiled for the cameras. Dated the men they approved of. Until one day, they stopped asking and started dictating. The deal was already in motion by the time I heard about it. An arranged marriage. Victor Langston. Son of a corporate ally, powerful in real estate, ruthless in temperament. I'd met him once at a gala, just long enough to feel the cold calculation behind his smile. He'd cornered me by the bar and said something like, "You'll learn to fall in line." They all do. I didn't flinch, but I remembered. I remembered everything. So when the official announcement came, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply said, no. At first, they didn't take me seriously. My stepmother scoffed. My brother laughed. My father stared at me for a long time like he was trying to decide if I was joking or just disappointing. When he realized it was neither, the switch flipped. "You ungrateful girl," he said, standing slowly. "You think this family is a democracy?" "No," I said. "I think it's a prison." The words hung in the air like a slap. He dismissed the staff from the room. Told them I needed time to cool down. Then he locked the doors and delivered his verdict. "If you walk away from this, you walk away from all of it. You will not embarrass us. You will not jeopardize everything we've built because of some childish fantasy about freedom. You are an Aragon by blood, but that can be corrected." I didn't flinch. "Then correct it." He blinked. Just once. Then turned to my stepmother. "Have the accounts shut. The cards cancelled. Security will escort her off the grounds. No screaming. No breakdown. Just cold execution. The way our family handled all its problems, efficiently. They gave me 1 hour. I packed what I could into a single bag. No one helped me. I passed familiar staff who wouldn't meet my eyes. My bedroom, the one with the canopy bed and French balcony, was already being stripped when I left. It was like I'd never existed. Just another asset written off. I walked out of the estate in silence. No car. No phone. No money. Just a duffel bag and the sting of abandonment. But what they didn't know was that I'd already started preparing. For months, I'd been moving pieces. Quietly transferring knowledge, connections, files. I knew this family. I knew they wouldn't let me go unless I forced their hand. I just didn't think they'd do it so easily. I relocated under a new identity, C. Daragon. I let them think I'd vanished, faded, failed. I worked temp jobs. I slept in a 6-bed hostel. I ate ramen and sold code snippets to startups. I built a reputation in silence. 1 client turned to 2. 2 to 10. I invested what little I had into high-risk ventures, and I watched them grow. I learned how to flip failure into fuel. And over time, I stopped surviving and started building. A name. A network. An empire. 6 years later, I stood in a high-rise office overlooking the skyline they once ruled. My name was whispered in boardrooms. Feared in investment circles. No one saw me coming. I made sure of that. My assistant knocked and stepped inside, holding a thin folder. "You're going to want to see this," she said. I took it. Opened it. Read the name on the first page. Aragon Group. I froze. Not because I was surprised. But because I wasn't. "They're looking for buyers," she said. "The company's bleeding. Legacy debt, mismanagement. They're trying to offload divisions. Fast." I closed the folder. "Do they know who's making the offer?" She shook her head. "We've kept your identity buried. They think it's a European firm." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Scheduled a meeting." "Are you sure?" she asked. "It's personal." "That's the point," I said. It started with them. It ends with me. The car ride to Aragon Group headquarters was a strange kind of full-circle moment. I remembered being driven here in the back of a black town car, flanked by bodyguards and stylists, my schedule planned to the minute. This time, I came alone. My driver was silent, the windows tinted dark. I sat back in my seat, legs crossed, fingers tapping against the leather armrest as the building came into view. It was still the same tower, imposing, silver, glass edges like knives. But there were cracks now. Not visible to the public, not yet, but I knew. Their stock was sinking. Their board fractured. Investors losing faith. They were dying a slow death and praying for a miracle buyer. I was the miracle. And the reckoning. I entered through the front doors with purpose. Black suit, red lips, no smile. The receptionist looked up and blinked, startled for half a second before checking her screen. Miss Aragon? I nodded once. She didn't ask questions. The name I was using, C. Daragon, was only slightly changed from my original one, but no one ever made the connection. I wasn't the naive girl they'd thrown out. And I'd made sure my public profile was carefully controlled. The board knew me only as a powerful investor with a clean portfolio and enough capital to revive a crumbling empire. Security escorted me to the top floor. The elevator ride was quiet. I stared at my reflection in the mirror-paneled walls. I didn't see the girl who'd cried herself to sleep the night they exiled her. I saw someone colder. Sharper. Someone built by exile and forged in fire. The boardroom was as I remembered it, sleek, long table, too many chairs, too much glass. They liked to perform power here. That was the Aragon way. Appear unshakable, even when you're rotting from the inside. My father sat at the head of the table, flanked by my half-brother Julian and my stepmother Elena. A few other board members I didn't recognize filled the seats. And at the far end, skimming through papers with a frown, Victor Langston. I walked in and watched them all look up. My father didn't recognize me at first. None of them did. There was a flicker of familiarity in Julian's eyes, but it passed. I had changed more than they realized. Not just the clothes or the name. Something deeper. Something permanent. Miss Aragon, my father said, standing slowly. Thank you for coming on such short notice. We're honored by your interest. I took the seat opposite him. Calm. Centered. Let's get to the numbers. Victor's eyes narrowed. His lips parted slightly, and he tilted his head. Wait a second, my father looked between us. Is there a problem? Victor stood slowly, disbelief dawning across his face like a bad memory coming back to haunt him. Celeste? Silence hit the room like a thunderclap. My father froze. His mouth fell open but no words came. Elena clutched her pearls like a cliché. Julian leaned forward, blinking, as if he couldn't trust his own eyes. I leaned back in my chair, met every gaze, and said, surprised? Impossible, my father muttered. You disappeared. No, I said. You erased me. There's a difference. I let the words hang for a moment, the tension thick and delicious. I could see it in their faces, how the years hadn't been kind. My father's once black hair was streaked with gray. The lines around his mouth had deepened. Elena's face was tighter than I remembered, the result of a desperate war against time. Julian looked tired. Victor looked like he'd seen a ghost. You're the investor? My father asked. I smiled. No. I'm the owner. Victor scoffed. You think you can just walk in here and, I don't think, I said. I act. Something none of you ever taught me, but I learned anyway. Julian stood, flustered. Celeste, come on. Let's talk in private. Now you want to talk? I said, raising an eyebrow. 6 years ago you stood there and said nothing while they threw me out like garbage. His jaw clenched. I didn't know they'd cut you off. Yes, you did. You just didn't care. My father regained his voice. You have no right to hold a grudge. You walked away from everything. I walked away from you, I said coldly. From your expectations. From your transactions disguised as love. You didn't exile me because I betrayed the family. You exiled me because I wouldn't be sold like livestock. Elena finally spoke, voice dripping venom. You think this is revenge? Coming back and waving money around? No, I said, standing slowly. This is power. And unlike legacy, I built it myself. I gathered the contract I'd brought and placed it on the table. Here's the deal. I buy controlling interest. I appoint new board members. You step down. All of you. You can't be serious, my father snapped. You need the money. I have it. Those are the terms. Victor laughed bitterly. You were always dramatic. I turned to him, cold. And you were always forgettable. He flinched. I gathered my things and looked back once before walking out. I'll expect signatures by Friday. Or you can enjoy watching the last remnants of your empire sink. They signed the deal 2 days later. No fight. No legal tantrums. Just a desperate faxed acceptance with trembling signatures and half-hearted conditions. I didn't even bother to read the fine print. I had already won. The empire they thought they'd buried me to protect now belonged to me. When I walked into the building as the new majority owner of Aragon Group, the staff stood straighter. No one knew what to expect. Rumors spread fast, about the mysterious investor who turned out to be the forgotten daughter, about the boardroom confrontation, about Victor Langston's pale face as I left him speechless. I didn't need to confirm anything. The silence was louder than any statement I could have issued. I took over the top floor office, my father's old domain. I had it stripped the same day. Gone were the portraits of past chairmen, the cigar-scented leather furniture, the arrogant empire wallpapering the walls. I replaced it with clean lines, glass, and a large matte black desk. No trace of him. No trace of them. My first act as owner was to fire Elena. Publicly. She came storming into my office in a cloud of perfume and pearls, trying to threaten me with social leverage, old connections, her usual passive-aggressive repertoire. I didn't say a word. Just handed her the termination notice and watched her expression drop like a bad investment. You think this erases everything? She hissed, voice shaking. You were nothing when we found you. I was nothing when you abandoned me, I said calmly. Now I'm the reason you're not being escorted out in handcuffs. So take the package and get out. Her heels clicked away in fury. I never looked back. Victor was next. He had wormed his way back into the company as a consultant, clinging to the last scraps of power the Langstons had left after their collapse. He tried to spin a tale about being a victim too, about being caught between family and business. Do you remember what you said to me the night of the engagement dinner? I asked. He blinked. Celeste, you said, you'll marry me whether you like it or not. Your father and I already agreed on your price. He went pale. I'm not here to argue, I said. You have 24 hours to clear your desk. If I see your name on any document after that, I'll sue you into oblivion. He looked like he might protest. Then he saw my expression and decided against it. Watching him walk out of the building he once tried to conquer with me on his arm was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. But I wasn't done. I reorganized the board, replacing old cronies with professionals I trusted. People who had nothing to do with the Aragon legacy. I sold off dying divisions, restructured assets, and funneled money into innovation. I didn't just want control. I wanted transformation. I wanted to burn the old name down to its bones and rebuild it in my own image. Still, part of me knew revenge alone wasn't enough. I didn't need their validation, but I wanted them to feel what I felt. Abandonment. Powerlessness. Shame. So I made sure they saw every headline. Exiled Aragon heiress returns as majority owner. The woman who bought her family Victor Langston fired from Aragon Group following takeover. I didn't give interviews. I didn't explain myself. I let them choke on the mystery. But not everyone faded quietly. Julian showed up at my office unannounced. He looked thinner than I remembered, a little sunken around the eyes, but still had that arrogant posture that made people think he was smarter than he was. Celeste, he said, stepping in like he still belonged. I didn't schedule a meeting. I just wanted to talk. As your brother. I leaned back in my chair. That title's expired. He sighed. You really mean to tear everything down? I'm not tearing it down, I said. I'm fixing what you broke. You think you're above all this now, don't you? No. I'm just not beneath it anymore. He stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a photograph. It was old. Torn at the edges. Me, him, and our father, back when I was still trying to be part of the family. I kept this, he said quietly. I stared at it. Then slid it back across the desk. You can keep the memories, I said. I'll keep the empire. He left without another word. That night, I stood alone in the office, looking out over the city. The skyline glittered. Somewhere below, they were watching me. Wondering how I did it. How I came back from nothing and bought the very people who threw me away. The answer was simple. I never forgot. And I never forgave. They thought the worst was over. That I'd made my point and would settle into some passive role as a figurehead CEO. They didn't understand. This wasn't a statement, it was a beginning. I wasn't just here to own what they built. I was here to dismantle every corner of it they thought was untouchable and build something better in its place. I called for a full audit of the Aragon Group's financial history over the last 10 years. Not just the corporate accounts, but personal transactions. Executive perks. Off-books deals. I knew the rot ran deep, and I was ready to dig it up. It didn't take long. My internal team found discrepancies in 3 departments, patterns that reeked of misuse and fraud. At the center of it was Julian. He had been using company funds to prop up a fake venture capital firm, moving money through shell companies and calling them strategic investments. When confronted, he tried to deny it. I gave him 2 options: step down and leave with what little dignity he had left, or face a full criminal investigation. He chose the latter. Within a week, Julian Aragon was removed from every leadership position, and our lawyers were preparing charges. It was poetic. The golden boy, crumbling under the pressure he never had to earn. The same man who watched me be exiled without saying a word now faced public humiliation and legal ruin. The media had a field day. Aragon brother ousted after fraud scandal. Celine d'Aragon cleans house in bold move. The heiress who doesn't forgive. Meanwhile, I made time for the employees. I walked through departments the Aragon name had always ignored. I asked real questions. Listened. Took notes. I promoted a woman from finance to replace Julian, someone smart, capable, and loyal. The look on the old board's faces when I announced it in front of the press was priceless. They thought I would bring in some polished male executive to keep up appearances. But I wasn't here to please. I was here to rule. In the middle of the chaos, a name kept surfacing: Luca Moretti. He was the corporate attorney my legal team had hired to handle restructuring. On paper, he was exactly the kind of man I avoided. Quiet. Methodical. Suits that didn't scream power but whispered competence. But he didn't flinch around me. He didn't hesitate when I made decisions others called aggressive. He watched. He measured. He didn't waste words, but when he spoke, it mattered. I noticed him first during a late-night meeting, when the others were drained and scrambling to say the right thing. He stayed still, studying the contracts like he was playing chess 10 moves ahead. When everyone else cleared out, he stayed behind. "You're not afraid to make enemies," he said without looking up. "Enemies are easy," I replied. "It's the false friends that cost you." He nodded. No flattery. No attempt to charm. Just an understanding. I didn't trust easily. Years of exile had hardened that part of me. But I remembered what trust felt like, faintly, and it wasn't fear, it was calm. Luca brought that calm. Still, I wasn't stupid. I did a full background check on him the next day. Clean. No skeletons. No old connections to my family or the Langstons. Just a sharp mind with a history of flipping corporate disasters into high-performing entities. The kind of man who built empires in silence. I wasn't looking for romance. I wasn't looking for anything. But I noticed the way he looked at me, not like a trophy, not like a threat. Like I was a riddle worth solving. Like he knew I was dangerous and respected that. He didn't try to insert himself into my story. He just showed up. Reliable. Steady. And for someone who had built an empire alone, that kind of presence was rare. One evening, after a board strategy session, I found him in the glass conference room, still working. "You don't strike me as someone who does overtime," I said, standing in the doorway. "I don't," he said. "Unless the person I'm working with makes it worth it." I raised a brow. Careful. That sounds dangerously close to flattery. He looked up. "You don't need flattery. You need someone who won't fold when the heat's on." That made me pause. Most people only saw 2 versions of me, the one I used to be, and the one I weaponized. No one spoke to both. But Luca saw more. Or maybe he just didn't need to pretend. I left without responding. But that night, I thought about him. About what it might mean to have someone who didn't want to tame me, fix me, or use me. But simply stood beside me. I wasn't ready to let anyone in. But I noticed. I didn't let my guard down. Not with the press, not with the staff, and certainly not with Luca. But the thing about power is, once you have it, people start pretending they always believed in you. They rewrite the past in their favor. The very ones who watched me walk out of my family's estate with nothing now greeted me with 2 wide smiles and thinly veiled flattery. As if I'd forgotten. I hadn't forgotten anything. I made a list the night I was exiled. Not on paper. In my mind. Every betrayal. Every silence. Every face that looked away. That list became my compass. And now I was crossing names off. My father had gone silent since the buyout. I knew he was still in the city, watching, stewing. He had stepped down from the company in shame but hadn't issued a single public statement. That wasn't like him. He always had something to say. Always had a camera nearby. That silence meant something was coming. I just didn't know what yet. In the meantime, I threw a gala. A calculated risk. The first major Aragon-hosted event since the takeover. I wanted it to be unforgettable. Not as a declaration of forgiveness, but dominance. I invited everyone who had whispered about my downfall, everyone who had sipped champagne the night they cut me off. And I made sure they knew exactly who was paying for their valet, their caviar, their very presence. I wore red. Not a subtle shade. The kind that made people look twice. The kind that said danger and didn't apologize for it. When I walked into that ballroom, the music didn't stop, but the air shifted. Whispers followed me. That's her. The exiled daughter. The one who came back from the dead and bought the graveyard. Victor was there, of course. He always hovered where money pooled. He had the nerve to approach me, drink in hand, smiling like we were old friends. I have to admit, he said, I didn't think you had this in you. I sipped my drink. And yet I always knew exactly who you were. He chuckled. Touché. He tried to linger, but I gave him nothing. I had no interest in small talk with men who once thought they owned me. Luca arrived late. No grand entrance. No drama. Just quiet confidence in a black suit that somehow made the rest of the room fade. He found me instantly. We didn't speak right away. Just exchanged a glance across the crowd. And that glance said more than any toast could. I eventually stepped up to the podium. The room hushed. I want to thank you all for attending tonight's celebration, I said, sweeping the crowd. When I was younger, I was told legacy was something you inherit. But I've learned that true legacy is something you build. Brick by brick. Scar by scar. And sometimes you have to burn the foundation to rebuild something stronger. Some smiled. Some flinched. I didn't care. The ones who mattered understood exactly what I was saying. After the speech, I stepped out onto the terrace for air. That's when I heard him behind me. You said scar by scar, Luca said softly. How many? Too many to count, I replied, not turning around. He joined me at the railing. Close, but not crowding. You scare them, you know. Good. But not me. That made me look at him. He didn't blink. Didn't smile. Just looked at me like he saw the whole picture and didn't flinch. That should scare me, I said. Why? Because people who don't flinch tend to hide knives. I don't hide anything, he said. If I wanted to cut you, I would have done it when you handed me control of your legal affairs. I laughed quietly. That's comforting. He tilted his head. I'm not here to comfort you either. Then what are you here for? To see what happens when a woman who was told she'd never survive decides to own everything instead. I didn't respond. I just let the silence hang between us, thick with something unspoken. Then, without thinking, I said the one thing I never said to anyone, not even myself. I don't know what comes next. It was the truth. I built this empire on rage and purpose. But what happens when the revenge is almost complete? When the storm quiets and there's nothing left to destroy? He didn't answer with words. He reached into his jacket and handed me a small envelope. Consider this your next move. I opened it after he left. It was a sealed document. An acquisition offer from a rival firm. One that had been trying to poach our assets quietly. But Luca had intercepted it, shut it down, and brought it to me without fanfare. No glory-seeking. Just loyalty. For the first time in years, I felt something I didn't recognize immediately. Trust. And I wasn't sure if I liked it. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, those nights were long gone. But because I couldn't stop replaying Luca's words. I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to see what happens. I had built walls high enough to keep the world out, but somehow he was standing inside without breaking a single one. And worse, I hadn't noticed until now. The next morning, I was already in my office when the call came in. It was from a journalist I'd blacklisted months ago, one of the vultures who'd feasted on the downfall of Aragon Group before my return. The kind who smiled sweetly and then spun the knife behind her back. You'll want to see what's trending, she said before I could hang up. I opened my screen. There it was. Anonymous sources, Aragon heir Julian claims exiled sister stole trade secrets during company takeover. I didn't flinch. It was pathetic. Sloppy. Desperate. But it was also dangerous. The headlines exploded. Whispers turned into commentary. My enemies, those I hadn't gotten around to yet, smelled weakness. I could feel it. They thought I'd trip. That I'd panic. Instead, I leaned forward and said, "Good. Let's drag it all into the light." I had nothing to hide. But I knew Julian did. By noon, my legal team had already subpoenaed his emails and internal memos. Luca coordinated the response with brutal efficiency. Every accusation Julian made was countered with evidence that would shred him in court. That evening, I stood at a press conference and addressed it directly. No denial. No dodging. Just the truth. I didn't steal anything. I outplayed them. And if my brother has a problem with that, he's welcome to try me in court. But he should know, he's not the first man who underestimated me, and he won't be the last. It went viral. Public support surged in my favor. The public loved a comeback story. But more than that, they loved watching someone like me, someone written off, refuse to apologize for winning. Julian's countersuit was dropped within the week. Not because he changed his mind. Because he realized he was holding a hand full of nothing while I held every receipt. He left the city soon after. My father was next. I received an invitation from him, hand-delivered. A private meeting. No lawyers. No press. Just us. I considered burning it. But instead, I showed up. He was waiting in his old private club. Still dressed like a king, but the crown had slipped. His tie was too tight, his posture too stiff. When he saw me, he stood, then hesitated like he wasn't sure how to greet me anymore. "You look," he started. "Don't," I said, sitting down. "Just say what you need to say." He sighed. "You were always going to take over. I see that now. You didn't see it then. I was wrong. You were cruel." He flinched. "Good. I thought I was protecting the company. The family." "You were protecting your pride," I said. "And you lost both." We sat in silence for a moment. He looked tired. Old. Small. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. "I didn't call you here to beg," he said finally. "I called you here because there's one thing left." He slid a document across the table. A legacy clause. Buried in Aragon Group's original charter. One that gave him the power to reclaim board authority in the event of a destabilizing conflict. Julian's lawsuit had triggered the review. I stared at the paper. Then at him. "You planned this?" "No. But I kept the option. Just in case." I smiled. It wasn't warm. "You're really going to try to take it back from me?" "I'm asking you to let me help you," he said. "We can rebuild this together." "No," I said, standing. "You don't get to rebuild what you destroyed. Not with me." He stood too, anger rising. "You think you won? You think because you have money and a title, you've changed?" "I didn't change," I said. "I became who I was always meant to be. And you're just now realizing you failed to stop it." He didn't follow me out. He didn't call. He didn't try again. I had silenced the man who once thought his name was louder than mine. That night, I returned to the office. I expected to be alone. But Luca was there, papers in hand, waiting. "He tried to use the clause," I said, tossing the document onto my desk. "I know," he replied. "I already voided it. It expired 2 years ago. They just never updated their records." I stared at him. "You knew he'd try." "I knew someone would. You could have warned me." "I wanted to see if you'd handle it yourself." "And?" He smiled, faint and unreadable. "You didn't disappoint." I should have felt triumphant. Invincible. I had taken down every threat in my way. Reclaimed the company. Burned the name they tried to bury me with and replaced it with something indestructible. But in that quiet office, under soft lights and the weight of everything I'd built, all I felt was a slow, unfamiliar ache. The revenge was almost over. What was left? A week passed. No more headlines. No more boardroom battles. No calls from lawyers. No desperate press leaks. It was over. Julian was gone. Elena was forgotten. My father had retreated into silence, stripped of every last illusion of control. Aragon Group was mine, through and through. And yet, the quiet felt foreign. For so long, my purpose had been revenge. Every move I made, every connection I built, was sharpened with the singular focus of taking back what they stole. Now that I stood at the top, alone, I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Only what I no longer needed. I sat at my desk late into the night, staring out over the skyline. That was when I heard the knock. Luca stepped in without waiting for an invitation. He held a folder in one hand and 2 coffees in the other. "You didn't come home," he said simply. I blinked. "I didn't realize you noticed." "I always notice," he replied, placing one of the coffees on my desk. He sat across from me, the folder between us. "It's done. Every threat neutralized. You have full legal and financial control now. There's nothing left to fight. That's what I'm afraid of." He raised an eyebrow. "You afraid? That's new. I've been fueled by rage for so long I don't remember who I was without it. Maybe you don't need to be someone without it. Maybe you just need to be someone more than it." I stared at him. Luca never gave advice. He offered facts. Strategy. Tactics. But this? This was different. This was him pulling back the curtain, showing me he saw more than just my warpath. He saw the pieces underneath. "You sound like someone who's planning to stay," I said cautiously. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Do you want me to?" That question hung in the air, weightier than any boardroom decision I'd ever made. I wasn't sure what scared me more. Letting someone in or admitting that I wanted to. "I don't know how to want people," I said quietly. "Not anymore. Wanting makes you vulnerable." "No," he said. "Wanting makes you human. What you do after, that's what makes you powerful." I hated how easily he disarmed me. Not with charm, but with truth. The kind that snuck past all my defenses and waited patiently in the quiet. There was another knock before I could answer. My assistant stepped in, her expression tight. "There's someone downstairs asking to see you. Says she's your mother." The room froze. My throat went dry. My real mother. The one who left when I was a child. The one who had vanished from our lives, whose name was forbidden in our house. I hadn't heard from her in over a decade. "Did she give a name?" I asked. "She said you'd know her by her voice." I stood up, legs feeling heavier than they should. Luca stood too. "Want me to come with you?" I shook my head. "No. This one's mine." I rode the elevator down in silence. Each floor a memory I didn't want to relive. When the doors opened, I saw her immediately. Older, of course. A little thinner. Softer around the eyes. But it was her. She stood from the waiting bench slowly, like she wasn't sure I'd recognize her. "I heard what you did," she said. "What you've become." I didn't respond. "I wanted to come sooner," she said. "But I didn't think I had the right." "You don't," I said coldly. "But you're here. So say what you came to say." She winced but nodded. "I'm proud of you." I laughed. It was bitter. Hollow. You don't get to be proud. You weren't there. Not when they cut me off. Not when they left me with nothing. You weren't there when I had to claw my way back. "I was watching," she whispered. "From a distance. I couldn't protect you. But I saw you rise. Then you should have seen how much it cost." We stood there in silence for a long time. Finally, she said, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to see you. The woman you became." And then she left. No dramatic hug. No reunion. Just the truth. That some absences are permanent, no matter how many years pass. I returned to the office, where Luca was waiting, still standing in the same spot. "Well?" he asked. "She came to witness. Not to fix anything." "Did you need her to fix anything?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. "No," I said. "I've already done that myself." He stepped closer, but not too close. "So what now?" I didn't have the answer yet. But I knew one thing for certain. The girl they exiled was gone. And the woman who returned? She was just getting started. 1 month later, I stood at the top of the Aragon building and looked down at the city they once ruled. I used to wonder what this moment would feel like. If I'd feel triumphant, vindicated, victorious. And I did. But not in the way I expected. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. It was steady. quiet. A kind of peace I didn't recognize because I had never known it before. I had erased their name from every corner of this empire. The company was rebranded, Disowned Holdings. The past wasn't forgotten, but it no longer had power over me. The press tried to spin it as a full rebirth, a dramatic disowning of the family legacy. They weren't entirely wrong. But they missed the point. I didn't change my name to hide from who I was. I changed it to remind them who made it matter. Our newest acquisition deal closed that morning. A legacy corporation that once ignored my pitches now fought for my attention. They'd underestimated me 6 years ago. Now they called me ma'am. Funny how money changes respect. But I'd stopped needing their approval a long time ago. I called for a meeting with my senior team, executives, analysts, department heads. They filed in one by one, expecting strategy, forecasts, numbers. Instead, I told them we'd be launching a new mentorship division, funding startups from overlooked founders, people like I used to be. Brilliant, capable, but cast aside. They blinked in surprise. A few exchanged glances. Then I added, this company was built to prove something. And I've proven it. Now it's time to build something bigger. They understood. No one questioned it. I stepped out of the boardroom and found Luca waiting, leaning against the far wall, arms crossed. He hadn't asked for a title. Hadn't pushed for credit. But he was always there, just out of sight, making sure I never had to fight alone again. Everything signed? He asked. I nodded. It's done. He studied me for a second. So, no more enemies left? I smirked. Not unless someone wants to be. We walked back into my office together. I poured 2 glasses of bourbon, not to celebrate, not to unwind. Just to mark the moment. You know, he said, most people build empires and then lose themselves in them. I found myself in mine. Yeah. But you don't have to keep holding the sword. You've already won. I handed him a glass. Then maybe it's time to stop fighting and start living. He clinked his glass gently against mine. What does living look like for Celeste Disowned? I didn't answer right away. I stepped out onto the balcony, letting the wind catch my hair, the city glowing beneath me. It looks like freedom. Real freedom. The kind they never wanted me to have. He joined me. Not hovering. Just close enough. I looked at him. You could have left any time. Why didn't you? Because I wasn't watching a car crash. I was watching a star being born. I laughed, low and sharp. You're getting poetic. I'm getting honest. And in that moment, I let my walls lower, not all the way. Just enough to let the future in. I had no doubt they still whispered about me behind closed doors. Said I was cold. Ruthless. Unforgiving. They were right. But they'd also have to say I rebuilt everything they tried to destroy. That I came back stronger, smarter, and untouchable. That I didn't just survive, I dominated. They'd have to admit I was the one holding the strings now. And that they would never, ever be able to cut me out again.